Ma'am, this lounge is reserved for real clients, not people looking for free coffee and attention. The sentence landed in the private banking lounge like shattered glass across marble floors, sharp enough to freeze every conversation in the room. At exactly 10:14 on a gray Thursday morning in downtown Chicago, Patricia Whitmore stood behind the polished walnut reception desk of Harrington Private Bank with her arms crossed and judgment written all over her face. She didn't whisper it. She wanted everyone to hear. And the woman standing in front of her heard every word clearly. Evelyn Monroe didn't blink. The 42-year-old black CEO stood perfectly still beside the velvet rope entrance, one hand resting on a worn leather tote bag, the other holding a slim black phone. No designer logos, no diamonds, no bodyguards, just dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, and calm eyes that had seen this exact moment before. Around her, the lounge slowly came back to life. A silver-haired man near the espresso station lowered his newspaper. A younger woman in a cream blazer glanced up from her laptop. Someone near the window quietly muttered, "Damn." Patricia leaned forward slightly, confident now that the room's attention belonged to her. "I'm going to need you to leave before security escorts you out," she added, her voice smooth with practiced humiliation. Evelyn looked past her toward the frosted glass doors leading into the executive offices. The air inside the bank felt cold enough to preserve old money and older prejudice. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Evelyn Monroe. She stepped closer to the desk without raising her voice. "I'm here to access my corporate account," she said calmly. "There's a scheduled transaction waiting for approval." Patricia let out a short laugh that echoed too loudly in the quiet room. "Corporate account?" she repeated. "Honey, this is private banking. We deal with high-net-worth clients here." The word honey dripped with disrespect disguised as professionalism. Evelyn didn't react, but something in the room shifted. It was subtle, like pressure building before a storm. Near the back hallway, a young black employee named Jordan Ellis looked up from his terminal. He recognized the name immediately. Monroe. His eyes narrowed toward the screen again, then widened. Evelyn Monroe wasn't just a client. Her accounts carried executive-level clearance tags most employees never even saw. Jordan swallowed hard and glanced toward Patricia, but she was too busy performing authority for the room. Richard Hale, a wealthy investor in a navy suit sitting near the fireplace lounge chairs, smirked openly now. "These scams are getting bold," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. Patricia smiled at that. Encouraged. "Exactly," she said. "People walk in dressed like they slept in their car expecting us to hand over access to millions." A few uncomfortable laughs scattered through the room. Evelyn finally looked directly at Patricia again. Her face remained calm, but her silence carried weight now. "Run my name," she said quietly. Patricia tilted her head. "Or what?" The room went still again. Even the soft piano music drifting through the ceiling speakers suddenly felt tense. Evelyn placed her phone gently onto the counter between them. "Or," she said, her voice low and steady, "you're about to make the worst decision of your career." Patricia Whitmore stared at Evelyn Monroe for a long second before letting out another cold smile, the kind people used when they believed power belonged only to them. Then she reached across the marble counter, picked up Evelyn's phone with 2 fingers like it offended her personally, and slid it back across the desk. "You do not threaten employees inside this bank," she said sharply. "Especially not when you have not even verified who you are." Evelyn caught the phone calmly without breaking eye contact. Around them, the private banking lounge had gone unnaturally quiet. Even the soft hiss of the espresso machine sounded nervous now. Jordan Ellis kept glancing between his monitor and Patricia, his fingers frozen above the keyboard. The executive clearance tag beside Evelyn's profile flashed red and gold on his screen. Restricted access. Internal ownership affiliation. High-level corporate relationship. He had worked at Harrington Private Bank for almost 3 years and had never seen that designation attached to a client account before. "Patricia," he said carefully, trying to keep his voice low, "maybe we should just verify the account before escalating this." Patricia did not even turn toward him. "Jordan, unless you want to spend the rest of your career greeting people at the front door, I suggest you stop interrupting." The words landed hard enough to make him step back. Richard Hale smirked from his chair beside the fireplace. "Kid's probably scared to call her out," he said while adjusting his cufflinks. "Everyone wants to play hero these days." Evelyn slowly turned toward him. Richard was in his late 50s, silver watch gleaming beneath the recessed lighting, confidence dripping from every word. She had met men like him her entire life. Men who mistook wealth for wisdom and comfort for superiority. Richard leaned back deeper into the leather chair. "Private banking is not a public library," he continued. "People worked hard to build standards in places like this." Evelyn's expression never changed, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "Standards," she repeated quietly. "Interesting word." Patricia seized the moment again. "Actually, let us make this simple," she said. "If you truly have business here, provide proof of funds for the transaction you are requesting." Several clients nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. That was not normal procedure. Not in a room built for discretion. But Patricia no longer cared about professionalism. She cared about control. Evelyn rested both hands lightly against the counter. "You are asking me to disclose confidential financial information publicly?" Patricia shrugged. "If you have nothing to hide, that should not be a problem." The room tightened again. A younger man sitting near the window slowly lowered his tablet. An older woman near the coffee station whispered, "This is getting ugly." Evelyn heard it. Patricia did too. But neither woman looked away from the other. Then Patricia made the mistake that changed everything. She reached toward her terminal, typed something quickly, and frowned dramatically at the screen. "Interesting," she said loudly enough for the room to hear. "I do not see any active authorization connected to your name." Jordan's head snapped upward instantly because he knew that was impossible. He had just seen the account himself less than 30 seconds earlier. Patricia had not searched the system. She had switched windows entirely. She was pretending. Jordan swallowed hard. His pulse thudded in his ears now. Across the lounge, a security guard near the hallway entrance straightened slightly after Patricia gave him a subtle nod. Evelyn noticed that too. She had seen entire rooms turn against people with less than a glance before. 20 years earlier, at 22 years old, she had walked into a Chicago investment office carrying a business proposal she spent 6 months building. The receptionist had looked her up and down before asking if she was there to deliver lunch. The men inside never even opened her presentation. She remembered sitting in her car afterward, gripping the steering wheel, while winter snow tapped against the windshield like tiny stones. She remembered promising herself that one day nobody would ever control access to power in front of her again. And now here she was. Same city, same look in their eyes, just a more expensive room. The security guard near the hallway entrance began walking toward the private lounge with slow, deliberate steps, his polished shoes cutting softly across the marble floor while every eye in the room followed him. His name tag read Daniel Mercer. Mid-40s. Former military posture. Calm face. But even he looked uncertain about what he was walking into. Patricia Whitmore straightened immediately the moment she saw him approach, like authority itself had finally arrived to support her version of reality. "Daniel," she said loudly, "this woman is refusing to cooperate with verification procedures and disrupting private client operations." Evelyn Monroe remained perfectly still beside the counter. "Interesting," she said quietly. "Now I am disrupting operations simply by standing here." Patricia ignored her. "We asked her repeatedly to provide proof of funds," she continued. "Instead, she wants to threaten employees." Daniel looked toward Evelyn carefully. Unlike Patricia, he at least attempted professionalism. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "maybe we can step aside and sort this out privately." But Patricia was not interested in privacy anymore. She wanted a public removal. She wanted the room to see who belonged and who did not. "No," Patricia interrupted sharply. "She can either provide documentation now or leave the premises." Richard Hale smirked from his chair again, clearly enjoying the spectacle unfolding around him. "Honestly," he muttered, "people always scream discrimination the second someone asks questions." Evelyn slowly turned her head toward him. "Questions are not the issue," she replied calmly. "Assumptions are." Richard laughed under his breath. There it is. Jordan Ellis could feel the situation sliding somewhere dangerous now. His hands hovered over the keyboard while the executive profile still glowed on his monitor like a warning light nobody else wanted to acknowledge. He leaned toward Patricia one more time. "Patricia," he whispered urgently, The account is legitimate. She snapped toward him instantly. Enough. The single word cut through the lounge like a blade. Jordan fell silent again, but several nearby clients had heard him clearly. The older woman by the coffee station narrowed her eyes. A younger man near the windows quietly pulled out his phone. The atmosphere inside the bank no longer felt polished or elegant. It felt charged, like a courtroom seconds before a verdict. Patricia stepped out from behind the desk now, heels clicking sharply against the floor. She stopped directly in front of Evelyn, close enough for the room to feel the confrontation tightening. Last chance, Patricia said coldly. Either show proof that you belong here, or Daniel escorts you out. Evelyn looked at her for several seconds without speaking. Calm. Controlled. Almost unsettlingly calm. Then she reached into her leather tote bag slowly. Richard leaned forward immediately, suspicion flashing across his face. Patricia crossed her arms, waiting triumphantly. But Evelyn only removed a slim pair of reading glasses and placed them gently onto the counter beside her phone. You know what fascinates me, she said softly. Patricia frowned. Excuse me. Evelyn glanced around the room. How quickly people confuse wealth with appearance. Silence. Heavy and immediate. She continued before anyone could interrupt. I built my first company from a one-bedroom apartment over a laundromat on the south side. I spent years walking into rooms where people assumed I was the assistant instead of the owner. Patricia rolled her eyes dramatically. This is not story time. But Evelyn kept speaking, her voice steady as steel beneath velvet. At 31, I closed a $48 million acquisition wearing sneakers because I had just come from a construction site. One banker refused to shake my hand until my attorney explained who I was. Daniel Mercer shifted slightly now. The room was changing around him. He could feel it. Even Richard Hale no longer looked entirely comfortable. Evelyn looked directly at Patricia again. And yet somehow, she said quietly, people like you never learn. Patricia's face tightened. People like me? Evelyn nodded once. People who believe dignity has a dress code. The room went dead silent. Then Jordan's monitor suddenly chimed loudly behind the desk. A sharp executive notification tone. Every head turned toward the screen instantly. Jordan's face lost color as he stared at the flashing alert appearing across the terminal. Patricia noticed his expression and snapped. What now? Jordan swallowed hard. Corporate access request, he whispered. Priority level 1. The notification tone echoed through the private banking lounge again, sharp and impossible to ignore, and suddenly every ounce of confidence on Patricia Whitmore's face flickered. Jordan Ellis stared at the screen like it might explode. The alert stretched across his monitor in bold red letters reserved for executive-level communication only. Internal corporate access. Immediate response required. Patricia stepped behind the desk quickly, irritation hardening her voice. Move, she snapped. Jordan hesitated for half a second before sliding aside. Patricia leaned toward the monitor, her expression tightening the moment she saw the authorization code attached to the request. Daniel Mercer noticed it too. Even Richard Hale sat up straighter now. The room could feel something changing, though nobody understood what yet. Patricia clicked through the notification aggressively, trying to regain control of the moment. This proves nothing, she muttered. But her voice sounded thinner now, less certain. Evelyn Monroe remained standing quietly near the counter, hands folded loosely in front of her, watching the room shift around her one breath at a time. Jordan finally found the courage to speak again. Patricia, he said carefully, the account attached to Ms. Monroe is linked to Monroe Capital Holdings. Patricia did not look away from the screen. And Jordan swallowed. That account manages over $4 billion in private equity positions through Harrington. Several people in the lounge audibly reacted. The older woman by the coffee station lowered her cup slowly. Richard Hale frowned for the first time all morning. Patricia spun around immediately. That information is confidential. Jordan looked trapped now, but he kept going anyway. You asked me to verify the client. Patricia's jaw tightened so hard it almost looked painful. Evelyn noticed the exact second panic began replacing arrogance behind Patricia's eyes. It was subtle, like a crack forming beneath ice. Daniel Mercer shifted his weight uncomfortably. Maybe we should de-escalate this, he said quietly. But Patricia was too deep into the performance now to stop. No, she said sharply. Something is off here. She pointed directly at Evelyn again. People do not walk into a bank handling billions dressed like that. Silence swallowed the room immediately after the sentence left her mouth. Even Richard looked uncomfortable hearing it said out loud. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. Dressed like what? Patricia crossed her arms. Casual. Unprofessional. Suspicious. Evelyn nodded once, almost thoughtfully. Interesting. Patricia tried to press forward again, desperate now. You expect us to believe someone with access to billions walks in here alone, carrying a 10-year-old tote bag? Evelyn glanced down briefly at the worn leather bag beside her. This bag belonged to my mother, she said quietly. She carried it to work every day cleaning office buildings in Milwaukee for 23 years. Nobody spoke. Patricia looked away for the first time since the confrontation began. Evelyn continued calmly. When I bought my first company, I carried my contracts in this same bag. When I signed my first $100 million acquisition, this bag sat beside my chair. The room had completely changed now. What started as entertainment for the clients watching had become something heavier, something uncomfortable. Richard Hale cleared his throat awkwardly. Daniel lowered his eyes briefly. Jordan looked at Evelyn with growing disbelief and respect all at once. Then Patricia made another mistake. A fatal one. She reached toward the keyboard, typed rapidly, and suddenly the monitor locked. Jordan's eyes widened instantly. Patricia, he whispered, did you just freeze the account? Patricia straightened defensively. Temporary hold pending fraud review. Daniel looked stunned. You can do that. Jordan answered before Patricia could. Not without executive authorization. Patricia snapped toward him again. Enough, Jordan. But it was too late now. Several clients had heard every word clearly. The younger man near the windows was openly recording with his phone. The older woman whispered, "Oh my God." Evelyn looked at the frozen account notification glowing across the screen. Then she slowly picked up her phone from the counter. Calm. Precise. Controlled. Patricia tried to speak first. If your funds are legitimate, then corporate can sort this out later. Evelyn unlocked her phone without looking away from her. No, she said softly. Corporate is about to sort it out right now. Then she pressed one button and lifted the phone to her ear. Naomi, she said calmly. Activate the Monroe Compliance Review. Branch 17. Full audit. Live. The second Evelyn Monroe spoke the words full audit lived the entire atmosphere inside Harrington Private Bank. Changed. It was no longer a disagreement between a manager and a customer. It felt like the room itself had suddenly realized it was standing on unstable ground. Patricia Whitmore laughed first, but the sound came out strained and hollow. You expect me to believe some random woman can trigger a corporate audit with one phone call? Evelyn lowered the phone from her ear slowly. Not random, she said calmly. Naomi Brooks's voice echoed faintly through the speaker, loud enough for the nearest people to hear. Audit request confirmed. Branch 17 compliance review is now active. Pulling transaction logs and employee conduct records. Patricia's face lost color for half a second before she recovered. This is ridiculous. But Jordan Ellis was already staring at the terminal again. New notifications were appearing across the system one after another. Compliance access. Internal review. Executive authorization override. He had never seen anything move through the network this fast before. Daniel Mercer stepped closer to the desk now, lowering his voice toward Patricia. Maybe we should stop this before it gets worse. Patricia snapped immediately. You are security, Daniel. Act like it. But even Daniel no longer sounded convinced. Evelyn remained perfectly composed while the room tightened around Patricia inch by inch. Richard Hale stood up from his chair at last, smoothing his expensive jacket nervously. This whole thing is getting out of hand, he muttered. Evelyn glanced toward him briefly. It was already out of hand when nobody thought I deserved basic respect. Richard looked away immediately. Patricia tried one more time to regain authority. You froze the room the second you walked in here acting entitled, she said sharply. You could have avoided all this by cooperating. Evelyn looked at her quietly. Cooperating with humiliation is not professionalism. Silence swallowed the lounge again. The younger man near the windows kept recording openly now. Two more clients had their phones out. Even the receptionist in the adjacent office doorway was watching. Patricia could feel the controls slipping away from her, and it terrified her more than she wanted anyone to know. Then Jordan's screen flashed again. This time his face visibly changed. Patricia, he whispered. There are prior complaints attached to your profile. Patricia turned instantly. What? Jordan hesitated, but the information was already visible across the monitor. 3 discrimination reviews from the last 18 months. The older woman near the coffee station gasped softly. Richard slowly sat back down again, suddenly wanting distance from the situation. Patricia's voice hardened into panic. Those complaints were dismissed. Naomi's voice came through Evelyn's phone again, calm and razor-sharp. Correction. 2 were buried internally without formal investigation. 1 was closed after client withdrawal. Patricia froze completely. Evelyn watched her carefully. Not angry, not emotional, just watching the truth rise to the surface on its own. Then the memory hit her again. 8 years earlier, Boston. A private investor dinner held 40 floors above the city. She remembered walking into the ballroom beside a white colleague who worked under her authority. The hostess handed him the executive guest packet instead of her. When Evelyn corrected her politely, the woman laughed nervously and said, "Oh my goodness, I assumed you were support staff." Evelyn remembered sitting through the entire dinner, smiling calmly, while men twice her age explained her own industry back to her, like she was invisible. She remembered leaving that night, standing alone beside the Charles River, promising herself something she never forgot. One day she would stop asking rooms for permission to exist inside them. Patricia's voice pulled the moment back to the present. "This is insane," she said loudly now. She manipulated the system somehow. Jordan looked stunned. "You think she hacked executive banking access?" Patricia pointed toward Evelyn desperately. "Look at her." The words hung in the air after she said them. Ugly, unfiltered, honest in the worst possible way. Daniel Mercer closed his eyes briefly, like even he could not believe what he was hearing anymore. Evelyn took one slow step closer to the counter. "That," she said softly, "is the first honest thing you have said all morning." Patricia frowned. Evelyn's voice remained low, but every word carried through the room like a judge reading a verdict. Because this was never about procedure. It was never about verification. "The second I walked through those doors, you decided I could not possibly belong here." Patricia tried to interrupt, but Evelyn did not stop. "You saw a black woman dressed simply and assumed fraud before facts." The silence afterward felt enormous. Then Naomi's voice returned through the phone one final time. "Evelyn, regional executives are joining the review call now. They want immediate clarification on why a $4 billion account holder was flagged for fraud inside a private banking lounge." The words $4 billion account holder hit the private banking lounge harder than any shout could have. The room did not erupt. It collapsed inward. Quietly. Completely. Patricia Whitmore stood frozen behind the reception desk, while the color drained from her face 1 inch at a time. Even the soft piano music overhead suddenly felt distant now. Naomi Brooks continued speaking through Evelyn Monroe's phone with the calm precision of someone used to managing crises at the highest level. "Regional executives are requesting immediate explanation regarding the fraud hold placed on Monroe Capital Holdings. All employee actions inside Branch 17 are currently under review." Patricia swallowed hard before forcing herself to speak again. "There has been a misunderstanding." Evelyn looked at her without blinking. "No," she said softly. "There has been a pattern." Jordan Ellis lowered his eyes briefly because he knew she was right. Everyone in the room knew it now. Richard Hale stared down at his polished shoes, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Daniel Mercer stepped farther away from Patricia without even realizing he was doing it. Distance had become survival. Patricia tried again, her voice tighter now. "We followed standard procedure." Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "You froze a verified executive account without authorization because you decided I looked suspicious." Patricia opened her mouth, but nothing came out immediately. And in that silence, the truth became impossible to hide anymore. The younger man recording near the windows whispered under his breath, "She is done." Evelyn picked up her reading glasses calmly and slipped them into her tote bag while the entire room watched her. Not one rushed movement. Not one raised word. Real power never needed to hurry. Naomi's voice returned through the speaker again. "Evelyn, internal review has already flagged unauthorized statements made by branch management in front of clients. Legal wants confirmation regarding discriminatory conduct." Patricia's breathing visibly changed. Faster now. Uneven. "This is absurd," she snapped suddenly. "Nobody discriminated against anyone." Evelyn stepped closer to the desk. "Then explain why you assumed fraud before verification." Patricia looked trapped. "Because," She stopped herself too late. Because what? Because of the jeans? The old tote bag? The black woman standing calmly in a room built for wealthy white clients? The answer hung there anyway, even without her saying it aloud. Evelyn watched her carefully. Exactly. The older woman near the coffee station slowly shook her head in disbelief. Richard Hale finally stood again, but this time his confidence was gone entirely. Maybe everybody should calm down, he muttered weakly. Evelyn glanced toward him. Interesting, she said quietly. You were comfortable when the humiliation was aimed at me. Richard immediately looked away again. Jordan's terminal chimed once more. This time the notification displayed across every visible monitor behind the reception desk. Executive conference line connected. Branch management review in progress. Patricia stared at the screen like it was a death sentence. Daniel Mercer rubbed a hand across his jaw uneasily. Patricia, he said carefully, maybe you should step back from the desk. She snapped toward him immediately. Do not tell me how to manage my branch. Evelyn's eyes sharpened slightly at the phrase my branch. She had heard ownership language like that before from people who confused temporary authority with permanent power. 10 years earlier, she had attended a private finance retreat in Aspen where a senior executive asked if she was part of the hotel catering staff, while she stood wearing a tailored navy suit worth more than his monthly mortgage. When she corrected him politely, he laughed and said, You cannot blame me for being surprised. That sentence stayed with her for years because it explained everything. People never admitted prejudice directly. They wrapped it inside surprise. Procedure. Concern. Standards. Patricia leaned toward Jordan suddenly. Disconnect the audit request. Jordan looked horrified. I cannot do it. It requires executive override. Patricia's voice cracked for the first time. I am the branch manager. Evelyn finally straightened fully, her calm presence somehow making the room feel even smaller. That title, she said quietly, is about to become past tense. Patricia looked directly at her then, really looked at her for the first time all morning, and something terrifying finally settled into her expression. Recognition, not of Evelyn's face. Recognition of what she had actually done. Evelyn reached for her phone again as Naomi spoke one final sentence through the speaker. Evelyn, regional leadership wants to know if you are prepared to identify yourself officially for the record. The question hung in the private banking lounge like the final seconds before a storm breaks. Evelyn Monroe stood motionless beside the reception desk while every person in the room watched her differently now. Not as an inconvenience. Not as a disruption. As the center of something much bigger than they understood 10 minutes earlier. Patricia Whitmore's hands trembled slightly against the edge of the counter, though she tried desperately to hide it. Jordan Ellis stared at Evelyn with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Daniel Mercer looked like a man replaying every decision he had made since walking into the lounge. Even Richard Hale had completely abandoned the smug confidence he carried at the beginning of the morning. Naomi Brooks's voice remained calm through the phone speaker. Evelyn, regional leadership is waiting. Evelyn lifted the phone slowly. Patch them through. A soft click echoed through the speaker, followed by another voice. Older. Controlled. Corporate. Ms. Monroe, the man said carefully. This is Charles Bennett, Regional Director for Harrington Private Banking. First, allow me to apologize for what appears to be a serious failure in protocol. Patricia's face dropped completely at the word apologize. Evelyn did not respond immediately. She let the silence breathe long enough for everyone in the room to feel it. Then she spoke in the same calm tone she had carried all morning. Charles, she said, protocol was not the failure. The entire lounge went still again. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. Evelyn continued. Your branch manager looked at me and decided I could not possibly belong inside a private bank before she checked a single fact. Charles Bennett cleared his throat uncomfortably through the speaker. I understand your concern. Evelyn's eyes never left Patricia. No, she said quietly. You understand your liability. A younger employee near the hallway lowered his eyes immediately after hearing that sentence. Richard Hale slowly sat down again as if his legs no longer trusted him. Evelyn finally stepped forward until she stood directly in front of Patricia's desk. Close enough now that Patricia could no longer hide behind titles or procedures or polished marble counters. You asked me for proof that I belonged here, Evelyn said softly. So let me help you. Patricia swallowed hard. Evelyn reached into her tote bag again and removed a slim black card holder. She placed a single matte black business card onto the counter between them. Jordan leaned forward instinctively. Daniel did too. Patricia stared down at the card without touching it. Monroe Capital Holdings. Evelyn Monroe, founder and chief executive officer. Underneath the name sat a silver embossed line most people in finance recognized immediately. Primary strategic equity partner. Harrington Financial Group. The air left Patricia's body so fast, it almost looked painful. Richard Hale whispered, "No way." Evelyn looked directly at Patricia while the room around them disappeared into silence. "You denied service," she said calmly, "to the woman whose company controls the largest private equity relationship inside this bank." Patricia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Evelyn took one final step closer. "And today," she continued, her voice low and sharp as cut glass, "you did not just humiliate a client." She paused. The entire room held its breath with her. "You humiliated one of the people responsible for keeping this branch profitable." Nobody moved. Nobody even looked away. Naomi Brooks spoke softly through the phone again. "Regional leadership has confirmed executive recognition status." Charles Bennett's voice followed immediately after. Tighter now. Nervous. "Ms. Monroe, on behalf of Harrington Financial Group, I sincerely apologize for the treatment you experienced today." Evelyn did not acknowledge the apology. Her eyes remained locked on Patricia. "You called me suspicious," she said quietly. "You froze my account without authorization. You attempted to remove me from a building my company has invested hundreds of millions into." Patricia's face had completely collapsed now. The confidence, the posture, the superiority, gone. All replaced by one terrifying realization. She had spent 11 minutes destroying her own career in front of witnesses, cameras, employees, and corporate leadership. Evelyn leaned slightly closer toward the counter. Not angry, not loud. Somehow that made it worse. "And Patricia," she said softly, "you made the mistake every small-minded person eventually makes." Patricia's lips trembled. Evelyn's voice dropped one final inch lower. "You mistook silence for weakness." The silence after Evelyn Monroe's words felt heavier than anything spoken all morning. Nobody inside the private banking lounge moved. Nobody even pretended this was still a misunderstanding. Patricia Whitmore stood behind the reception desk staring at the black business card in front of her like it had shattered the reality she built her career around. Jordan Ellis slowly stepped back from the terminal, almost instinctively creating distance between himself and the disaster unfolding beside him. Daniel Mercer lowered his hands completely, no longer standing like security, just a man witnessing the collapse of authority in real time. Then the monitors behind the desk flashed red. Simultaneously, access suspended. Patricia's employee credentials had been frozen remotely. The alert spread across every visible screen in the branch. Patricia blinked at the monitors in disbelief. "No," she whispered under her breath. Naomi Brooks's calm voice came through the speaker again. "Branch manager Patricia Whitmore has been placed under immediate administrative suspension pending executive review." A quiet gasp moved through the lounge like wind through leaves. Richard Hale looked stunned. The older woman near the coffee station slowly shook her head again, this time not with disbelief, but satisfaction. Patricia grabbed the edge of the counter. "You cannot do this without an investigation." Charles Bennett's voice answered immediately through the phone. "The investigation is already underway." Patricia's face tightened. "I have worked here for 14 years. Evelyn looked at her quietly. "And somehow you still never learned the difference between professionalism and prejudice." Patricia tried one last desperate reach toward authority. "I was protecting the bank." Evelyn's expression never changed. "No," she said softly. "You were protecting your assumptions." Jordan looked down briefly because the truth of that sentence landed on everyone at once. Patricia had never investigated facts. She investigated appearance. The room knew it. The employees knew it. Even Patricia knew it now. Daniel Mercer finally cleared his throat. "Ms. Whitmore," he said carefully, "you should probably step away from the desk." The irony in his voice was impossible to miss. Less than 15 minutes earlier, he had been preparing to escort Evelyn out. Now he was quietly asking Patricia to surrender control of her own branch. Patricia looked around the room, desperately searching for support that no longer existed. Richard avoided eye contact completely. The clients recording on their phones kept filming openly now. Jordan stood silent beside the terminal because there was nothing left to defend. Even the younger reception staff near the hallway no longer looked afraid of Patricia. Fear had changed directions. Naomi spoke again through the speaker. Executive leadership has also authorized immediate restoration of all Monroe Capital accounts and removal of the fraud designation. Jordan quickly moved back to the keyboard. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked the frozen account. The red warning labels disappeared from the system one by one. Patricia watched it happen in real time. Every action she had taken against Evelyn being reversed publicly in front of witnesses. Evelyn calmly picked up her tote bag from the counter while the room remained silent around her. The same old leather bag Patricia mocked without saying the words directly. The same bag carried by a woman who now held more influence over the future of the branch than anyone standing there. Charles Bennett spoke again through the speaker, his tone far more careful now. Ms. Monroe, regional leadership would like to personally meet with you regarding today's events. Evelyn slipped her phone into her bag slowly. I am sure they would. Then she glanced toward Jordan Ellis. What is your position here? Jordan looked surprised to even be addressed. Junior relationship associate. Evelyn nodded once. You were the only person in this room willing to verify facts before judgment. Jordan swallowed hard. Patricia stared at him in disbelief, like betrayal mattered more to her than what she had done. Evelyn turned back toward Charles Bennett's voice on the phone. Promote him. The room froze again. Jordan's eyes widened instantly. Charles answered almost immediately. Understood. Patricia's shoulders visibly dropped at that moment because she finally realized the full truth. This was no longer damage control. The future of the branch was already being rebuilt without her in it. Evelyn looked around the lounge one final time. At the phone's recording. At the clients who watched quietly instead of speaking up earlier. At the employees pretending they never saw warning signs before today. Then her eyes settled on Patricia again. Calm. Controlled. Unshaken. Power is not proven by how you treat important people, she said softly. It is revealed by how you treat the people you assume are powerless. Nobody answered her because nobody could. For several long seconds after Evelyn Monroe finished speaking, nobody inside the private banking lounge said a word. The room that had once felt polished and untouchable now felt exposed under its own lighting. Patricia Whitmore remained frozen behind the reception desk, staring at the suspended access warning blinking across her monitor like a public verdict. Jordan Ellis stood beside the terminal, still trying to process the fact that his career had just changed in less than 15 minutes. Daniel Mercer quietly stepped away from the center of the room entirely, no longer needing to play the role of enforcement because the truth had already done the work for him. Evelyn adjusted the strap of her mother's old leather tote bag over her shoulder and looked around the lounge one final time. She noticed everything now. The clients avoiding eye contact because they had stayed silent too long. The employees pretending they had never seen Patricia behave this way before. The phone still recording because people only become brave once consequences appear. None of it surprised her anymore. 20 years in business had taught her one painful lesson over and over again. Bias rarely introduces itself loudly at first. It hides behind policy, tone, procedure, suspicion. Then when challenged, it calls itself professionalism. Naomi Brooks spoke softly through the phone again. Your car is waiting outside whenever you are ready. Evelyn nodded slightly. Thank you, Naomi. Charles Bennett's voice returned one last time through the speaker. Ms. Monroe, Harrington Financial Group, is fully committed to correcting this situation. Evelyn looked toward the ceiling windows where cold Chicago light spilled across the marble floor. Good, she said calmly. Because this situation existed long before I walked through those doors today. The sentence landed heavily across the room because everyone understood exactly what she meant. Patricia lowered her head for the first time all morning. Not out of humility, out of realization. She had spent years mistaking unchecked behavior for competence because nobody powerful enough had challenged her before. Evelyn turned toward Jordan again. Do not lose the instinct you showed today, she said quietly. Most people trade integrity for comfort long before they realize what it costs them. Jordan nodded once, unable to fully hide the emotion in his face. Evelyn started walking toward the lobby exit, then stopped halfway across the lounge, as if remembering something important. Without turning around, she spoke one final time. My mother cleaned buildings for people who would not even look her in the eye. She used to tell me something every morning before school. The room listened carefully now because her voice carried something deeper than authority. It carried memory. She said dignity is not something other people hand you. It is something you refuse to let them take. Even Patricia looked up after hearing that. Evelyn slowly turned back toward the room. Calm, composed, unshaken from beginning to end. That is why I never raised my voice in here today, she continued softly. I did not need to. The younger employees near the hallway exchanged quiet glances. Richard Hale stared down at the floor again, unable to escape the embarrassment settling around him. The older woman by the coffee station gave Evelyn a small, respectful nod. Evelyn returned it politely. Then she delivered the final sentence that stayed in the room long after she left. Real power is not about making people feel small, she said. It is about refusing to become small when others try to reduce you. Silence followed her all the way to the lobby doors. No applause. No dramatic celebration. Just the heavy stillness that comes when a room full of people realizes they witnessed the truth exposed in real time. Evelyn Monroe walked out of Harrington Private Bank the same way she walked in. Alone. Calm. Wearing simple clothes and carrying an old leather bag. But the difference now was that everyone inside finally understood who she had been from the very beginning. Not because of her title. Not because of her money. Because real dignity does not announce itself when it enters a room. It reveals itself when the room tries to take it away.